Okay, now to more news, and in a bid to strengthen regional connections and the Indigenous voice in Parliament, Indigenous Australians Minister Ken Wyatt has created a new advisory group. The committee, which has been co-designed by the Morrison Government, is committed to designing a more diverse future for more Indigenous Australians. Minister Ken Wyatt joins me now from Canberra. Minister, thank you for joining us on Sky News across Australia. This is a wonderful initiative. Can you take our viewers through what it means for regional and bush communities?
Well, they're going to be listened to, Peter, and I think that's important. It's great to be on your program, by the way. When I go out to communities, the thing that is often said to me is, Minister, when are you going to listen to us? Or when is government going to listen to us? We've got challenges here. We need, and they'll outline what they need. And you do go away and you work with your agency to try and resolve some of those issues. But I must, when I reflected on what communities said, thought about my times on national bodies, and I didn't always capture the views of people in the bush or in the regions. I went with what I thought would be a good policy direction. This time, I want to hear from people at the community level and for government to shape their responses around their voices as well.
Okay, so what do you think would be a good outcome out of this particular regional committee? What are you hoping? How can Indigenous Australians find their voice in the regions?
Well, if I take the model that Galarrwuy Yunupingu spoke to me about when I raised this with him, he just said to me, Minister, we want our voice to be based on our traditional clan leaders. So the model for us would be our clan leaders would speak for our community, because that is how we're structured culturally. It is the appropriate way, and you'll hear the voices in strength, not organisations. The Warlpiri people have said to me, we want it based on our cultural footprint. So I've said to all three groups that are working on all three committees working on this, is there is not to be a one-size-fits-all. We have to reflect the diversity of our nation and the rural and country regions, because I want their voices to come up to governments, including state and federal, so that we can address issues better. Because as I walk through communities and visit them, some of them still remain imprinted in my memory of we've not shifted on some matters, and we have to shift. We are now 2020. I used to see some of this in the 1900s, the 1990s. I'm dating myself. But we've got to change. We can't keep doing the same old, same old.
Minister, a couple of other topics. Now, of course, juvenile Indigenous crime rates, particularly in North Queensland, are really out of control at the moment. And I know this is complex, and I know as the Minister you see these challenges all the time. What can we do to try and bring this under control?
Actually, I want to work with the Northern Territory Government to look at how we involve the elders in the processes, because I think sometimes we've made mistakes of using punitive measures when there are underlying issues that see these kids behaving in a manner that's not appropriate. And I'm not justifying poor behaviour like that. But where communities are involved, where there's diversion programs and where we tackle the issue of cultural strength, then we've seen some changes. I've seen it when I worked in New South Wales with community projects. The Tamworth men stood behind their young people, became mentors and supporters, intervened on their behalf when things weren't quite as true as somebody else said they were. And that saw a turnaround. So I think we've got to return back to some of those cultural structures, which are the strength of those communities, because young people, in most instances, will take notice of elders, but we've got to have the elders in a position where they are involved. Yeah.
Look, some of our greatest players in both the AFL and NRL have been Indigenous players, and the NRL has put out a new ad, Minister, and it's come under a fair bit of political fire for being too politically correct, with an overemphasis on the Indigenous part of the game. Do you have a comment on that?
Look, I think one of the things that is great about sport is it brings us together as a nation. And we certainly take notice of our great sporting heroes. Doesn't matter what the code is, whether it's women's sport or men's sport. But sometimes we try and be as inclusive as possible within the advertising. The AFL, in terms of its stance on racism, has done a tremendous job in getting a unified, joint, walking together message out. I've only had a quick glimpse at the NRL ad, and I can see where they're striving to be inclusive, and how people respond to it will be the challenge that they will have to address. But they used Tina Turner previously, highly successful. And I can see where they're going in terms of trying to encapture everything that is important within our total community, and the inclusiveness approach might have been seen as clumsy by some people, but at least they've made the effort to try and convey a message of we are all playing together.
Yeah, I think it's a masterstroke that they've brought Tina Turner back. But just on that as well, Ken, there's also debate constantly about whether we play Advance Australia Fair, the national anthem, at games which, you know, there are many, many Indigenous players involved. In fact, at the last State of Origin, the Indigenous players, virtually to a man, didn't sing the anthem. Do you have a view on that?
Look, I am proud of my country. I'm proud of what we've achieved. And if we have a national anthem, then we need to include that at the times when we have major events. Because I was asked a question once before about what were my views on cricketers who weren't singing the national anthem, and I said I can understand it if they are highly emotional and they stand and listen to the anthem, and then you see them attempt to mouth. But where we say no, then we're saying no to a whole range of our society. If you want to, you can stand and not sing, but not to not play it is something that I wouldn't have done. I would have preferred to have seen it played. It is a respect for our nation, regardless of our political persuasion or position, and it is something that we adopted and moved away from God Save the Queen to something that was distinctly Australian.
Well, Minister Ken Wyatt, always a pleasure to have you on Sky News Across Australia. As I said at the outset, I think this regional initiative on your behalf is a masterstroke, and I really do hope that it gets the traction that it deserves.
Peter, thank you very much, and thank you for your kind words on that.